Camilla's hands were on her shoulders, pushing her to the edge of the balcony. Not a trip, not an accident, but a deliberate walk toward the open air. There was no rail high enough to stop a toddler from falling 5 stories. Charlotte begged, "Please stop," twice, in a quiet, clear, scared voice. But Camilla kept walking, and the only thing that stopped her from going over the edge was that a royal guard moved quickly, like a gunshot. No warning, no permission, and no time to contemplate. He just got up and left. Before we show you the precise moment, his boots hit the marble, and the chaos that followed across every hallway of Windsor Castle. Please leave a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure the bell icon is on. What happened up there was not a mistake. He crossed a line to keep her alive. People didn't use the balcony on the upper east wing of Windsor Castle very much. It was barely bigger than a hallway, but it was surrounded by stone archways that had been there for hundreds of years and had carved iron balustrades that kept people quiet. It looked out over the Queen's Rose Garden, where long, well-kept lines of pale English blush and Windsor ivory roses were folded with gentle care into the green. This wasn't the kind of balcony where people waved to crowds. It was a ceremonial area, but it was also private. It was a spot where some members of the royal family might stand for a short time between duties to collect their breath without being observed. The garden below sparkled with dew on this cloudy afternoon, and the air above it was soft and quiet. Princess Charlotte was standing close to the middle of the stone fence. Her gloved fingers rested softly on the smooth marble edge just behind the fancy trellis work. She put her shiny black shoes next to each other. Her weight was evenly distributed, but the way her shoulders were set, squared but not too stiff, made it evident that she was keeping her composure instead of just resting in it. She wore a royal blue coat dress that had been pressed too sharply to be her choice. A small satin ribbon was tied perfectly behind her braid. She didn't look sad, she looked attentive. She wasn't being rude. She wasn't backing down. She was breathing. Her helper had given her 5 minutes. The woman had said, "Just a moment to yourself. I'll be in the side room if you need me," Charlotte said, and she nodded once, thankful. Not too talkative, but thankful. A royal guard waited just inside the arched balcony door. He was tall, Coldstream, in his mid-30s, and as quiet as marble. Sergeant Caelan Ward was his name, but not many people asked. He stood perfectly still, with his chin up, eyes front, and rifle across his chest. The tall black bearskin helmet made him look regal, but behind that posture was a mind that was quietly engaged, one that didn't scan with mistrust but registered. He had learned the difference between noise and intent on a previous assignment in Helmond. He didn't see Charlotte as a subject, he saw her as a duty. She moved her feet a little. He stayed still. A gust of wind blew a strand of her hair up, and she put it behind her ear. He stood his ground. Ward could see the entrance to the interior gallery behind her from this point. A service tunnel went around from the right, where Charlotte couldn't see it, but he could. That was when he saw it. The air felt different. The hallway got a little darker, as if the light coming in had curved around a moving person. Then the echo low-heeled shoes were measured, controlled, not hurried, but on purpose. The left shoulder of Sergeant Ward moved 0.5 millimeter. Not panic, not stress, simply getting ready, because someone was coming up to the balcony, and that wasn't planned. Charlotte initially heard the sound of the sneakers. The voice was crisp, clipped, and too sluggish to be Catherine's, and too sharp to be the attendant's. She turned just enough to look behind her. Queen Camilla came out of the archway with a calm strength. There were no aids, no salutation, and no statement of arrival, just the swish of a cut charcoal gray coat with pearl buttons that shone slightly in the dim light. Her gloves were a light cream color, and she held them freely in one hand, but her knuckles looked white against the leather. Charlotte spoke a modest, polite thing without thinking. "Good afternoon, Mom." Camilla didn't say anything back. She stepped forward and looked over the whole balcony before her glance landed on the child. It was a look that showed neither love nor familiarity. "You're not standing well," she replied plainly. "Your left foot is twisted out," Charlotte said as she looked down and fixed it. "I'm sorry, Mom. And too close to the edge. I'm not leaning." "I didn't say you were," Camilla said, moving closer. "But Charlotte, this isn't a playground. It's a ceremonial structure. We don't sit on it like it's garden furniture." Sergeant Ward didn't say anything. His posture never changed, but behind his eyes he was paying attention to every word, tone, and speed that Camilla took. Charlotte nodded once and moved back an inch from the edge. Her fingertips fell off the stone. Camilla went after. The pacing didn't feel right. Not maternal, not supervisory, but something that seemed like it was protecting its territory. She didn't stop at a good distance for a talk. She closed the space by half again, and now she was standing right behind the girl, her shadow covering Charlotte's coat. Camilla replied in a hushed voice, "You are more than just yourself. That entails knowing where to put your hands, feet, and how to stand." Charlotte became stiff. "Yes, Mom, you can't sit still." "I wasn't." Camilla stopped her. "You were. It shows up in pictures." Charlotte's eyes fell. Her fingers curled up a little bit, into the seams of her coat. Ward's hold on the gun stayed strong, but his chin moved a little bit. His pupils followed Camilla's body. The queen consort was now 3 feet away from the edge of the balcony. Charlotte was in the middle of them. "Turn your shoulders," Camilla instructed. "No, like this." She stood next to Charlotte and moved her upper arm with 2 strong fingers. Then she moved Charlotte's stance by pressing the heel of her hand against the small of her back. The movement wasn't rough, but it wasn't nice either. Charlotte murmured quietly, "I don't want to stand this close." Camilla didn't say anything. "You're being too sensitive," she replied. "This is how you're supposed to face the gallery during summer events. You'll have to put up with more than this." Charlotte turned her head slightly, and her lips parted as if she were going to say something, but no sounds came out. The guard was closer now, still silent, still within the threshold, but no longer frozen to the floor. Camilla adjusted the girl's shoulders again, this time more firmly. The cold stone behind Charlotte pressed against the back of her coat, and Camilla's fingers didn't let go. Charlotte's shoes were just touching the fancy edge of the balcony's threshold. The iron balustrade behind her didn't really protect her. It was more for show than for defense, with wide gaps and a weathered patina that got stuck in soft fabrics. She didn't say anything else. Her chest rose slightly under her coat, and her breath was shallow. Her hands stayed at her sides, and her fingers twitched once, as if she didn't know whether to move or keep still. Camilla's voice got lower, calm but sharp. "You've been coddled," she said. "Everyone's afraid to tell you the truth, but a royal face must carry discipline, especially a young one, especially a girl." Charlotte's lips parted, and her body tensed, not from the cold wind that blew through the balcony's edge, but from something heavier. "I didn't mean to fidget," she muttered. "I was just thinking," Camilla said with a hint of sarcasm. "Thinking shows us confusion. Don't mistake silence for strength. You're not here to drift, you're here to project." She moved behind Charlotte and put both hands on the girl's shoulders for a moment. It might have seemed like love from a distance, but it wasn't. Charlotte flinched, a slight instinctive recoil. The guard noticed it. Sergeant Ward moved his weight as he took 3 steps closer. He didn't lunge or intervene, he just moved. It was as if he were changing his visual angle to have a better view, and he was still quiet and calm, but he was now observing very closely. Charlotte tried to move to the side, but Camilla's grip pulled her back. At first it was only a gentle push, but then it got stronger. "I don't like standing this close," Charlotte whispered again, this time more quietly. "Please," Camilla didn't move. "Next month you'll perform worse on the palace terrace. If you can't control your anxiety now, you'll embarrass yourself then." The queen consort put one hand firmly on Charlotte's upper arm, and the other slid to her side, pushing gently but firmly to change the child's position again. Charlotte's heel slipped back half an inch, the ball of her foot hit the outer stone, and the space behind her shrank to just a few inches of air. Sergeant Ward moved again, this time forward. He didn't say anything or draw attention to himself, but his steps were now purposeful, crossing the line from ceremonial presence to silent readiness. Charlotte murmured again, "I don't feel safe." Camilla either didn't hear her or didn't care. "I told her to stand straight," she snarled, and Charlotte stopped. Ward's hand slipped a little from his rifle. His fingers opened as if he were about to throw the gun away if he had to. Charlotte's legs tightened, and her eyes flicked down, a look that showed she was instinctively ready. Camilla's hold got tighter. "You're making a fool of yourself." Then she pushed a little, but that was enough. Enough for Charlotte's heel to slip off its perch. Enough for the iron edge to gash across the backs of her shoes. It was enough to make her torso tip back without her meaning to. And it was enough to make Sergeant Kalen Ward move like a fuse had been lit. Charlotte's body pitched back as if she had lost her footing. She hadn't fallen yet, and she hadn't screamed, but gravity was already taking its first claim. Her arms involuntarily sprang up, a quick breath seized in her mouth. The iron railing showed no mercy, and in that split second, before anyone could even say a word, Sergeant Kalen Ward moved. He didn't step or move forward. He bolted. His tall black bearskin hat brushed the stone arch as he crossed the threshold in one quick step. His ceremonial boots scraped hard against the limestone as his body dropped low and forward. He dropped his rifle mid-motion, and it clattered against the wall as both arms shot out. Charlotte's back was already tipping. The sky beyond the balcony flashed pale and unreal. Ward's hands reached her torso just in time, one arm locking across her ribs, the other catching beneath her shoulder. He pulled her inward with all the trained force he had, spinning his own body between hers and the edge. His shoulder hit the fluted column next to the archway with a sickening thud. Pain shot through his upper arm, sharp and white-hot, but his grip held. Charlotte crashed into his chest, knocking the air out of both of their lungs, but he pulled her back from the drop with just his momentum and muscle. She grabbed his tunic without thinking, her fingers instinctively grabbing the fabric. Neither of them said anything, just breathed hard and unevenly. The guard staggered back 2 steps, his boots slipping again, until Charlotte's shoes found solid stone beneath them and her weight stabilized inside the protective span of his stance. He didn't let go of her. Not yet. "You're safe," he said quietly, even as pain shot through his ribs. "You're not going anywhere." Her breathing was quick and shallow now, and she was still standing on the balcony, still behind them. The iron railing cracked slightly in the wind. Camilla looked at the scene with wide eyes, not so much out of worry as out of disbelief. "What on earth?" she yelled. Ward didn't turn. He gently but firmly moved Charlotte's feet back from the edge, and then moved so that she was completely behind him. Only then did he exhale slowly, like a diver coming up from the water. Charlotte grabbed his sleeve again, and I almost collapsed. Her voice shook. "You didn't," he murmured softly. "You're standing on solid ground." Camilla scoffed loudly. "This is crazy." She was surprised by her own reaction. Ward's shoulders straightened. He turned just a little bit, putting himself right between Charlotte and Camilla, a protective stride forward that spoke more than words. Charlotte wiped her eyes with her sleeve behind him, still holding onto the edge of her coat. "You've blown this way out of proportion," Camilla said again. No one pressed her. Ward didn't say anything. He didn't raise his voice. He just stayed where he was, standing still, with his body still blocking the youngster from the edge of open air. The stillness that followed was worse than any allegation. What almost happened didn't need to be said. It had been witnessed. Camilla didn't move. She didn't kneel. She didn't touch Charlotte or ask if she was okay. Instead, she brushed the front of her coat and stared at the royal guard as if he had created the trouble. "She panicked," she remarked quickly. "Kids do that sometimes when you give them too much." Sergeant Ward didn't say anything, and his posture didn't change. Charlotte was now standing just behind his right elbow, her body blocking some of the light. Her fingers had stopped shaking, but she still hadn't said anything. Her cheeks were red, her eyes were wide, but not with drama. They were wide with calculation, the kind of quiet that comes after fear, not during it. Camilla continued, her voice hard and clipped. "I was helping her fix her form. She just slipped, that's all." "You were moving her," Ward replied quietly, "toward a drop." Camilla blinked. "Excuse me," she said twice. "I don't feel safe." "You didn't stop. I was fixing her posture. You had both hands on her shoulders, and one on her back, and you were holding her tighter before the incident." Camilla's mouth was a thin line. "And you? What? Leave your station to put on a show? Do you believe that flinging yourself off a balcony makes you a hero?" Ward didn't answer that either, but his jawline had gotten tighter. Charlotte's breathing was more even now. She had let go of his sleeve, but she was still near, looking down, and her face was still tilted toward the protection of his presence. Voices stirred at the end of the hall. Footsteps came closer, not quickly, but by instinct. 2 aides, a steward, and maybe a footman. They all stopped a few feet from the archway, unsure of whether to go in. The scene in front of them, with the guards standing as a wall, the princess half hidden behind him, and the queen consort keeping her distance with defensive poise, was clear. Camilla went to them and said, "There's no emergency. The child overreacted." "I didn't." Charlotte's voice broke through. It wasn't loud, but it was obvious. Charlotte didn't continue the phrase. She didn't have to. Camilla's gaze went back. Ward lifted his head a little, just enough to see the stewards who were now paused at the edge of the gallery. "Medical personnel," he whispered calmly. "Please." One of the footmen blinked, nodded, and then turned quickly. Camilla stepped closer to Zaw, but Ward moved against her to keep the boundary. "I'll have your commission questioned," Camilla said, her voice pinched with surprise. "You're getting in the way of royal orders," he said. "I'm protecting a minor, someone who almost fell off a royal balcony. She wasn't going to fall. She did." Camilla opened her lips, but no words came out. The quiet behind her was getting louder, and the voices down the hall were getting louder. You couldn't just walk away from this event with a sharp remark and a closed door. Something had been seen, and that fact was now beyond her control. The sound of polished leather shoes hitting stone sliced through the tension like a flare. Not hurried, not casual, measured, and sure of authority before it even showed itself. At first, Prince William came into view. No entourage, no hesitancy, and Catherine was right after her, her coat still half-buttoned and one glove in her hand. They didn't say anything when they walked in. They didn't have to. They saw everything at once. Charlotte was pale, calm, and shaking, and she was half hidden behind Sergeant Ward. Camilla stood rigid and immovable, as if she were annoyed. Ward's arms were at his sides now, but his stance was still tense, and his body was tilted like a barrier. Catherine was the first to move. She walked 4 steps across the balcony and knelt down next to Charlotte without saying a word. Her arms softly curled over the girl's back. Charlotte's hands, which were unsure at first, found their way into the folds of her mother's coat. "I'm okay," she muttered, but her voice broke in the middle of the phrase. Catherine whispered softly, "You don't have to be." Prince William stayed near the arch. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. "What happened here?" Camilla turned first. "She fell." "No," said another voice. William's eyes moved. Charlotte had talked while still in Catherine's arms, but now she was standing up. Her look was not defiant, but plain. She said, "She was holding me. I told her to stop. She didn't." William stared at her for a long time before turning to the guard. "Sergeant." Ward's voice was calm. The princess was pushed back against the railing. She said she was uncomfortable twice. I saw immediate physical contact. Her heels slid. I stepped in. Camilla let out a loud breath. "This is crazy." Catherine looked up, and her eyes were as keen as a knife. "She's trembling." Camilla smiled, but it was a tight smile. "Because a soldier jumped off a balcony like we were being attacked." Ward simply said, "She was almost over the edge. There was no room for error by the time I moved." William moved forward now, not swiftly, but on purpose. He stood next to his wife and daughter. His hand lay softly on Charlotte's back, keeping her steady. He then looked at Camilla. "You have to get out of the upper wing." Camilla blinked. "What? You heard me," she said. "This is a misunderstanding," and she couldn't believe it. "You're responding to how things look." She was shocked. He remarked in a calm voice, "She asked you to stop." She said it once more. "You didn't." Camilla's voice went down an octave. "You're believing what a child says instead of what I say." William didn't move. "I'm trusting a toddler, a chilly stream guard, and what I see with my own eyes." She moved forward a little bit. "You're going too far." He said no in a hushed voice. "I am keeping my daughter safe." The sentence hit home hard. The aides at the room's edge stopped moving. Camilla gazed at the guard, the child, the parents, and the hushed staff who were afraid to move. For the first time, she had nothing to say. William looked at the steward who was closest to him. "Please take Her Majesty out of this hallway." Camilla opened her mouth and then closed it again. At that moment, rank meant less than truth, and too many people had seen the truth. Camilla stayed still. The quiet that came after William's order was not obedience. It was resistance hidden in silence. She stayed still, caught between anger and bewilderment, her eyes narrowing a little as they focused on the royal guard, who was still standing between her and Charlotte. "You're making a mistake," she finally whispered, her voice low and harsh, letting theatrics take over discipline. He broke convention by leaving formation. He lunged at a kid. "I caught her," Sergeant Ward said in a calm voice. "After you pushed her," Camilla said with a laugh. "Don't get too full of yourself," he answered. "I'm not. I'm writing it down." That got her. Her face changed, not to meddle, but to show that she knew. The look on her face said she had suddenly realized this was more than just a reprimand. She responded coldly. "You forget your place." Ward answered right away. "No, Mom. I know exactly what it is." He stood straight with his hands behind his back. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't going to back down. He went on. "My duty is not to hierarchy. It's about protection, being alert, and having a conscience." William didn't say anything. Catherine didn't look up. Charlotte stayed calm, and her breathing was slow and steady as she lay under her mother's arm. Camilla took a little step forward, almost without being seen, closing half the space and testing her determination. Ward stayed still. He didn't move. He just stood there, with a straight line of red in his clothing. His stance was sharp, even though his shoulder hurt, and his ribs hurt. Camilla responded, "You've made your choice," with a tight look in her eyes. "Let's see how long you can keep it." Ward said, "I'll hold it, as long as she stays behind me." Camilla took a quick, sharp breath through her nose. William's voice came in softly. "That's all." 2 stewards came up presently. One of them softly reached out to Camilla's shoulder, not touching her, but guiding her. "This way, Your Majesty." She didn't answer. but she turned and looked back quickly, not at William or Charlotte, but at the guard. Ward held her stare, not in a challenge, but with utter calm. She walked away and turned around. No words, no apology, and no admittance. Only the sharp sound of her heels going away down the gallery hallway, buried by the stone in silence. Ward did not let up. He didn't move. He stayed right where he was, not to confront but to protect. As the light came in from the now empty balcony behind him, his shadow spread over the floor like a drawn line. Because some walls in palaces are built of marble and others are covered in red wool, the hallway stayed quiet long after Camilla's footsteps faded away. There were no voices or orders, just the soft rustling of Catherine's coat as she moved it around to better protect Charlotte from the last bit of wind coming in from the balcony. Sergeant Kalen Ward has not gone back to his old job. He stayed where he was, just in front of the archway. One hand was resting on the inside of his thigh, while the other was softly pressing on the line of his belt. His jaw was set, but it wasn't tight. He breathed in and out. The agony in his right shoulder stayed the same, sending controlled pulses down his side, but he didn't pay any attention to it. He was just observing Charlotte, not thinking about it or judging it. Catherine pulled back a little so she could look her daughter in the eye. "Sweetheart," she whispered in a sweet voice, "do you want to sit down or go? There's no rush." Charlotte shook her head once. "I want to stay for a minute." William offered a small nod to one of the adjacent footmen, who silently stepped back to make room. Catherine turned to the guard. "Is it okay if we just stand here with you for a minute?" Ward bowed his head just slightly. "Of course, ma'am." Charlotte made one step toward him. He knelt down gently and carefully, even though his side hurt. He didn't move like a soldier bowing to royalty. He moved like a man who was reducing himself to a child's level without being rude. Charlotte stared at him for a long time. "You didn't even think," she replied in a hushed voice. "You just moved. I saw you lose your balance," he remarked. "That was all I needed. Did you get hurt?" He smiled a little bit. "Not enough to be important." She thought about it for a while, then walked forward and threw her arms around him. It wasn't tight or long, but it was real. He didn't hug her back. Not completely, just softly resting one hand between her shoulder blades, still being careful not to break any rules or cross any lines. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled by the front of his uniform. His answer was calm and sure. "I'll always be there you need me." Catherine turned her head away, and for a moment her face was blank. William didn't say anything, but when his eyes met Ward's, they said something more than approbation. They said something closer to respect. Charlotte stepped back and wiped her eyes on the sleeve of her coat. She muttered, "I'm fine now." Ward nodded once. "Then I'll take a step back, but not too far." She smiled, which was a small, frail thing, and for the first time since the balcony, she was able to take a full, free breath. By the time they met again, the light had shifted. The sun in the late afternoon cast long shadows on the stone floors of the East Gallery, giving the portraits a gentle golden glow and warming the silence between footsteps. Most of the castle was back in rhythm. Aides going back to work, stewards smoothing out the day's problems. The bustle of restoration covered up what had almost turned into a calamity. Sergeant Ward went back to his patrol, not because he had to, but because he felt like it wasn't done. Under his uniform, they cleaned and bandaged the abrasion on his shoulder. His rifle was once again in the right place, and he put his bearing back together with the care of a man who realized that formality was not a performance but armor. As he walked, his tall black bear-skin hat made a lengthy shadow behind him. He wasn't in a hurry or unsure, he was just moving slowly. He was walking by the archway that went back to the south hallway when he heard the soft sound of shoes, smaller and lighter, with a slow, steady beat that didn't proclaim anything but got closer. Charlotte went around the corner. She was walking alone, but not without someone watching her. Her mother was a few feet behind her, talking to a steward. The princess had a new coat on. Her braid was redone, and her eyes were no longer wide, but they were still alert. When she saw him, she stopped. He also stopped. No one else did. Catherine kept talking. 2 staff members walked by. There was no scene, no words, just Charlotte looking up at the tall guy in red, who had put himself between her and stone, between her and stillness. She didn't say anything or bow. She only nodded once, very slightly. The kind of smile kids give when they don't know how to say trust. Sergeant Ward gave it back. No smile, no flourish, simply a nod of the head and respect given and received. Charlotte turned around and walked away. After taking a deep breath, Ward went back to watching, because some protection doesn't stop when the threat is gone. It goes on, quietly and without being seen, like a post that no one controls. But some people never leave. Was it okay for the royal guard to disobey the rules if it meant keeping Princess Charlotte safe? Should anyone, especially a member of the royal family, ever ignore a child's apparent discomfort? And do you think that some posts should never be left alone? Leave your opinions in the comments. We read them all. If you haven't already, push the like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell symbol so you never miss a story from inside the palace walls. And if you know someone who thinks that duty should always come before power, send them this video. We have more stories to tell. Now pick one of the videos that are on your screen, and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time and place with a fresh royal guard.